Grid isolation. The night it actually happens, most people will do exactly one thing wrong, and it will cost them everything. They'll leave their building connected to a grid that is either dead, contaminated, or actively dangerous. I know because I ran the scenario myself in my own apartment at 2 in the morning after reading the 2003 Northeast Blackout post-incident report front to back. 55 million people across 8 states and Ontario lost power in 9 minutes because a single unmonitored software alarm at First Energy in Ohio failed silently. And the cascade nobody stopped went continental. The engineers who built the synchronous alternating current grid in the early 20th century designed it for maximum efficiency under normal load, not for graceful failure when conditions aren't normal. When nodes start dropping, the 60 Hz synchronization that ties every generator and every load together becomes a transmission line for the fault, not for the power. The first action is mechanical and takes 30 seconds. Go to your main breaker panel, switch the main breaker to off, and attach a physical tag to it. That tag isn't ceremonial. It tells anyone who enters that the isolation was intentional, not a trip. In an industrial lockout tagout protocol, which is what utility linemen follow to avoid being electrocuted by backfeed from residential solar or generators, that tag is required before anyone touches downstream wiring. You're applying the same logic to your building. A live grid feeding into a dead neighborhood doesn't stay stable. Transformers running with no load on the secondary side can develop voltage spikes. A generator someone 3 blocks over plugs into an outlet without isolating first can push current back upstream. Isolation cuts you out of that equation entirely. The misconception people operate on is that staying connected keeps options open. It doesn't. It keeps you exposed. The grid costs you a fixed monthly rate to access a system with documented cascade failure modes. Cutting it manually costs zero and eliminates a specific class of risk that no smart home automation can patch. The breaker is the patch. Pull it first. If the grid comes back and it's verified safe, reconnecting takes another 30 seconds. You've lost nothing. Everything else in this list assumes you've already done this one. Digital air gap. Every device in your home that connects to a network is a potential attack surface. In a grid down event triggered by a cyber attack, which the National Security Agency has publicly modeled as the most probable precursor to large-scale infrastructure failure, that attack surface doesn't go dormant just because the lights went out. Stuxnet, deployed in 2010, compromised Iranian centrifuge control systems that were physically separated from the public internet. The attack vector was a USB drive left near the facility. The point isn't geopolitical. The point is that firmware-level compromise persists through power cycles. A router that loses power and restarts on a restored grid can re-establish a compromised connection automatically without any action from you. The fix isn't sophisticated. Power down every router and smart hub, physically remove batteries from devices where that's possible, and disable automatic updates that would re-establish cloud connections without your knowledge. Factory locking critical Internet of Things devices, smart locks, smart thermostats, smart meters, puts them in a known, controlled state instead of leaving them running software you can't audit. Quick disconnect and full firmware remediation are 2 different operations. The disconnect is what you do right now. In the first 10 minutes, it removes the device from active network participation. The remediation was flashing firmware, resetting to factory defaults, re-evaluating which devices belong in your rebuilt network. Happens once the situation is stable. Right now, pull the plug, remove the battery, tag it. If you want the full device-by-device protocol, it's linked in the description. Drop hardened and ready in the comments if you've already started your own isolation list. That's the community signal for people operating on the same architecture. Perimeter hardening. Your door is probably your weakest structural point, and most people have no idea what weak means until they look at the data. A standard residential door with a standard strike plate held by 3/4-inch screws into a hollow door jamb fails under a single kick, generating roughly 150 foot-pounds of force. A healthy adult moving at moderate speed can deliver that. Replacing the strike plate with a reinforced steel model and driving 3-inch screws directly into structural framing studs raises that threshold above 1/200 foot-pounds, an 8-fold improvement for under $40 in hardware. classical military fortification doctrine, from the concentric rings of a Roman castra to layered obstacle positions in 20th century defensive engineering, operates on a single principle: delay, not repel. You are not trying to make your home impenetrable. You are trying to make it time-consuming enough that anyone assessing targets moves to the next one. Post-disaster looting pattern research documents that targets requiring more than 60 seconds of forced entry are bypassed at significantly higher rates than softer targets. Seal vents with removable covers, thermal and chemical ingress both travel through open ductwork. Move critical electronics and paper documents to interior rooms away from exterior walls. The full hardening checklist, including window film specifications and door bar dimensions, is in the resource library linked below. This prep runs in parallel with everything else on this list. The perimeter you're hardening right now is also the perimeter that makes the next step, communications independence, actually matter. Protocol independence. Here is the truth that most people in the preparedness space won't say directly. The government alert systems you are counting on will be among the first things to fail when the scenario is large enough to matter. The emergency alert system in the United States runs over internet backbone infrastructure. The 911 system became unreachable within 4 minutes during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, a localized regional event, not a national one. The centralized network operation centers that manage those systems were designed for average load. They were not designed for the simultaneous traffic generated when every person in a metropolitan area tries to access them at once. That's not a design flaw in the traditional sense, it's a physics problem. A system optimized for efficiency under average conditions has, by definition, reduced capacity margins under peak conditions. When the peak is a national event, the margin goes to zero. The alternative is local and peer-to-peer. A NOAA weather radio receiver, operating on dedicated frequencies between 162 thon 400 and 162 thon 550 MHz, broadcasts continuously on a separate infrastructure that doesn't route through the public internet. It was engineered to maintain broadcast capability during commercial communications stack failure. That's the signal you want when everything else is dark. For local mesh communications, product placeholder Meshtastic LoRa hardware creates encrypted peer-to-peer networks with no cell towers, no internet dependency, no centralized control plane. These operate on frequencies the centralized system can't reach and can't shut down. Relying on a centralized protocol for emergency response is structurally identical to the single points of failure you're trying to survive around. Go local, go peer-to-peer, stay invisible. The full off-grid communications architecture is documented in the archive, link in the description. The archive exists because this information disappears when people stop looking for it before they need it. Subscribe now, and it's there when the search function isn't working. Analog activation. I spent 2 days without power during an ice storm. Not a catastrophic scenario by any standard, just a routine grid failure. By hour 6, I had a dead phone, a dead router, and a working gas stove I couldn't light because the igniter was electric. I stood in a cold kitchen holding a lighter feeling genuinely stupid. The stove itself was mechanically functional. The electronic ignition, added to improve convenience, had converted a system that would have worked fine into one that required electricity to access. That scene is the entire argument for analog activation compressed into a single moment. A hand crank radio rated for no AA weather band reception requires 0 electrons from the grid. The cranked generator converts mechanical energy from your arm into stored electrical energy. Product placeholder Eaton FRX3 hand turbine radio is one documented option that's been in continuous production for years. The receiving hardware is simple enough that it was in common use before rural electrification. The NOAA network it receives from was specifically hardened to maintain broadcast capability during infrastructure failure. The two systems were built for exactly this combination. A pitcher pump, the hand-operated mechanical pump that preceded electric well pumps across rural America, lifts water from a static water table up to 25 feet below grade. The mechanism is a check valve and piston assembly with no components that require electricity. Pre-1939 rural households operated entirely on this principle. Installing one over a shallow well or a cistern converts a dependency on electric pump motors into a dependency on physical effort. Physical effort is always available. Paper topographic maps for your county cost under $15 from the United States Geological Survey and cannot be remotely disabled, remotely updated with corrupted data, or drained of battery. A gas stove with a standing pilot, not an electronic igniter, runs on a mechanical gas valve and a continuous flame. A crank radio costs $30 and operates indefinitely. A digital emergency radio costs $300 and goes dark when its battery does. The analog version eliminates the failure point, not because it's aesthetically satisfying to own old technology, because the math works, and the math is the only thing that matters in the first 72 hours, microgeneration. The most common generator mistake in a grid-down event is the most dangerous one, plugging a portable generator into a household outlet to backfeed the house. This kills utility workers. It pushes live current back through the service line to the distribution transformer, where voltage is stepped back up. A lineman working on what they believe is a dead circuit is now working on a live one at distribution voltage. This is why every generator manual, every licensed electrician, and the IEEE Standard 1547 on distributed generation requires physical grid isolation before any portable generation goes online. You already did that in the first action. The main breaker you tagged is the isolation that makes microgeneration safe. The protocol from there is fuel arithmetic. A 5,000-watt portable generator at 50% load, the efficient operating range for engine longevity, burns approximately half a gallon of gasoline per hour, 12 gallons per day. Untreated gasoline in sealed containers stays usable for roughly 30 days. Treated with a commercial fuel stabilizer, 12 months. Prioritize loads ruthlessly. A refrigerator cycling intermittently draws around 150 watts, light-emitting diode lighting draws under 60 watts per fixture, a communications setup draws under 20 watts. Run the generator in scheduled 2-hour intervals rather than continuously. Stay rational. Attempting to run everything you normally run is how you burn through fuel in 48 hours and go dark anyway. The load calculation sheet for your specific setup is in the resource library linked below. Do the math before you need it, not during. Redundancy loops. I made this mistake once. A single emergency cache, water, food, cache, documents, all in one location. One problem with one location, and the entire supply chain collapses. Naval expeditionary logistics encoded the solution to this into standard procedure in the 19th century and hasn't changed it since. No critical supply exists in only one location, and every supply rotates on a defined schedule to prevent degradation below minimum usable threshold. The engineering concept is mean time to failure applied to consumables. A single cache has a mean time to failure equal to the shelf life of its contents plus whatever time elapsed before you need it. A rotating loop, 3 locations, each holding a share, cycled on a monthly schedule using first-in, first-out rotation, reduces total supply failure probability to near zero. The math is simple. The discipline required to maintain the rotation schedule is the actual work. Specific items that require looping. Water at 1 gallon per person per day as the baseline rate, stored in sealed food-grade containers, rotated monthly. Cache in small denominations, 5s and 1s, because automated teller machines will be offline and large bills are non-functional if no one can make change. Copies of critical documents in sealed waterproof bags, identification, insurance records, medical prescriptions, property documentation. Spare components for the systems built in this list. Common fuse sizes for your panel, batteries in the formats your analog devices use, fuel stabilizer stock. A secondary communications path in physical form. A written address and contact list for people in your network, because digital contact lists are stored in devices that can fail. The distinction between a static cache and a rotating loop is the difference between a preparation that works once and a system that sustains operations past the initial failure event. Every item on this list is either free or costs under $100 to implement. Grid isolation, digital air gap, perimeter hardening, local communications, analog tools, microgeneration, rotating caches. That's the architecture. Build it before you need it. That is the only timing that actually works.